I want to take issue with the premise of this gathering, which is that there's a workforce issue that we have to address. Texas right now has a historically low unemployment rate, below 4%. The unemployment rate of Texas has never been lower. We may have problems in this state. Let's stipulate that we probably do have problems in this state. But workforce does not seem to be one of them at the moment. So can we just get up and go home now? Is that it? No conversation?
Well, I wish that were true. I think as I look out across this audience, a lot of friends here, and certainly when we talk to employers across the area, they're having a difficult time. This is the number one thing on their mind, are finding the talent that they need in order to continue and to grow as a business. You know, we realize one of the great things going on in Texas, and particularly North Texas right now, it's a booming economy, meaning that we're creating lots of jobs. This area has grown by over the last 8 years, 1 million people have moved into North Texas.
This is the metro area, among the metro areas, that has grown the most, right?
That's right,
yeah.
Across the country. Right. And if you do the math on that, there have been about 335 jobs a day being created over that time. But if you do the math on the other side, 395 people a day are moving in to take the job. The real challenge is able to grow our own within the economy to meet the needs of this growing workforce, and we're leaving people behind who were born and raised here, and that's really where I see the greatest opportunity today. It's not that we're not able to attract talent, it's that we're struggling to grow talent within our community.
So you think, Chancellor, that the growth in the population notwithstanding, the big challenge is that we have a lot of people in Texas who do not have the skills or the opportunity or both to transition from where they are into the workforce?
I mean, let's face it, absolutely. Today in Dallas, we've looked at it. Our folks here that work in the labor market area tell me that fully 65% of the jobs right now today in North Texas require some type of post-secondary credential. Maybe not a bachelor's degree or advanced degree, but an associate's degree or certificate, or at least some type of business and industry recognized credential in order to be competitive for the jobs. You have it, you've got a great door open for you. You don't have it, there are not many opportunities today.
Judy, from the industry side of this conversation, how carefully do you scrutinize the resumes or the backgrounds of the people who come to you and apply for jobs? I have to believe that a post-secondary credential is only as good as the skills behind it. There are probably jobs you have that are much more focused on skills than on a resume line, right?
Absolutely. So what we're finding is that while the degrees are absolutely important, they're absolutely critical, but you know, with the emerging technologies, it's not just about the being a mathematician or a data scientist anymore. It's also some of the soft skills that we bring to the market, things that, like empathy and the ability to manage, creativity, complex problem solving.
Are those things necessarily that can be taught, and are those things necessarily that can be taught specifically in a higher ed institution?
Absolutely. So we've got a lot of partnerships, some of them here in the program, but we really think it's important to have on-the-job training and apprenticeships, internships, partnering with our local communities, agencies, and academia to create these programs where you're doing that on-the-job training and allows for both the hard skills, if you will, or the academia part, but as well as those soft skills. So they're learning on the job what type of problem solving looks like, what creativity looks like. Because oftentimes we see, especially in the creativity, people tend to get stuck sometimes in that creativity, but if you don't allow for that space, well, how do you teach creativity in academia, right?
In some ways, Chris, I want you to talk in a second about exactly how Year Up provides a bridge between higher ed and industry, and provides a way into both from the communities. But this idea of soft skills is interesting. Down in the realm of public ed, we hear a lot these days increasingly about social and emotional learning. That it's not only learning math and science, but there's actually more, well, I guess you would call them soft skills at that level also. We don't necessarily understand how that translates through the one end of the pipe to the other, but I'm hearing this kind of in a different way. This is a critical part of preparing kids for the world of work, is it not?
Absolutely. And so, I'm just going to take issue with even the term, since we started the entire dialogue that way, of soft skills.
Yeah.
I mean, what we just heard from Judy was explicitly that in the workforce, in the 21st century workforce, these are critical skills. They're enhancing the business ability to perform. And so we have to be teaching them. And so what we find at Year Up, what we've been focused on is really weighting those evenly and being able to identify how we can help opportunity youth, these low-income 18 through 24-year-olds, adopt the kinds of professional norms and behaviors, collaboration, adaptability, and in many ways, why we see them as such an incredible source of talent for these jobs is because what they're bringing to the work is that resilience and that grit that comes from holding down 2 jobs, raising your younger sister, managing really tough environments, and learning how to negotiate that from a very early age.
So say a word about what Year Up is. I'm actually new to Year Up myself, although I feel like now I completely understand and am behind the premise of the organization. But just say a word about what that is, and then I want to ask you something about the community that you serve.
You bet. So Year Up, basically, what we do is we work with low-income young adults, 18 through 24, and help them to move from minimum wage to meaningful careers in 1 year. And the way we do that is through our incredible partnerships nationwide with community college campuses, but especially here in Dallas with El Centro and with the Dallas County Community College District to teach not only the soft skills, so we have program managers that are focused in a cohort-based learning model, providing those soft skills and training those young folks in that work, but then also leveraging our community college to provide the credits, the in-demand technical skills, and putting those together with a high expectation and high support model that helps those young folks have incredible outcomes.
Do you go, and this is what I wanted to ask about the community that you serve, do you go looking for these kids, or do these kids come looking for you?
Well, that is the most fascinating part of this. In all of the new markets, we basically launched 3 years ago an expansion campaign across the U.S. And in several new markets, including LA, Phoenix, and Dallas, our biggest challenge is not the corporate partners like Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase, who are already invested and trust Europe can train an incredible middle skill entry-level talent pipeline, provide that. It's getting the students, Evan. We're really struggling, like other organizations, per Scholas, to have those students come to us. And it's a conundrum that we're struggling with because the demand is so great here in Dallas that we could easily triple in size in the next year to be able and provide those opportunities.
Chancellor, do you have the same problem or a version of the same problem in that there are probably a lot more kids in the community who would benefit from coming through your door, but often it's just a question of being able to persuade them to focus and pay attention and to come?
Well, it is, but we're making great progress.
Yes.
And I have 2 great partners here that work with us. Accenture was with us along with AT&T when we opened the first PTAC in the state of Texas, the
Right.
Pathways Technology, to make that. But people, the challenge is they don't understand the jobs and they don't understand the expectations. So we're finding we really have to engage.
They in this case is the students. Yeah.
Students for that, and so they come in with a limited worldview. Their parents haven't gone to college. Maybe they've been told all their life that we can't afford to send you to college, and they don't understand what's happening with the job market that's out there today. Getting engaged in with partners like Accenture and like Year Up, where we really begin those students along a journey much earlier. I mean, we literally start coming out of the 8th grade and teaching them about the expectations, and we've seen a major shift in students that understanding the needs of the employer, wanting to get involved, and we find that encouraging. We now have almost 80 partners working with us in high schools to share this information. And if there's one message I can get across today, Evan, is that we cannot do this business alone. And if college is trying to do it alone, they're not going to be successful at it. We absolutely must engage partners.
You mentioned
in
that
this
you're going
process.
down into the high school. So is the Dallas Independent School District one of those partners, clearly?
Yes.
And a willing partner and an eager partner because they understand that their success is your success and your success is their success.
Well, they do today, but let me tell you, partnerships are hard because what we find is if you look across the country, I'll just take one transition that we're terrible at: high school to college. Overall, we lose more people in that one simple handoff than any place else in the pipeline. And decision a student makes right then is going to determine their future at that point. And we really have to come together, do a much better job of managing that transition, which is why we're doing things like the Dallas County Promise and others that are really taking ownership of that. I mean, we've shown if we just simply work on that transition, we grew 35% year over year in enrollment last year, and it was focused on one thing: let's making sure students understand what it takes to make that next step. Then we lose them when we get ready for the workplace or transfer others along the way. So it really, this idea that somehow educational institutions are autonomous or they're going to try to do it alone is absolutely a failure, and the data shows that that's a failure.
Judy, to the point of going into the public schools, starting this conversation before they even show up on a campus like this one, you were mentioning to me that you work from an Accenture standpoint with students not just at the college level or even at the high school level, but going down into middle and grade school. You're trying to persuade kids at the earliest possible age to begin to think about this stuff.
It really does start all the way at the elementary levels. I was actually just watching a clip this morning where, so this is outside of the US, but it was very inspiring in that in Estonia, they have children at the elementary level doing 3D printing, and it's not just hitting a button and doing print, but they're actually required to create their own designs to then print. And I thought, wow, that is a very, it's an immersive technology, right? It's teaching them both the critical skills required to create those, but also, how you have to adapt and move. And, not every little line you draw, for example, in a software program is you have to learn to be able to adapt and back to the creativity as well.
And no one in that situation in Estonia is using the word workforce necessarily with these kids, but the net effect of doing that work that early absolutely has a connect to what happens down the road. Right?
That's right. And I actually want to go back to you earlier when you were talking about the soft skills and how they're applying those. There's a great quote. I wish I could remember who said it, but I think it's really important to the conversation, which is knowledge is a commodity, right? And it's no longer having that knowledge that's important. It's what you do with it. And and I think that very much applies to this panel and the programs that we're all working really hard to to develop.
Chancellor, is the reason that partnerships are so hard is because the system is constructed to impede or discourage collaboration? I'm reflecting. I have a friend, Ava Marie Ayala from the Dallas News is here somewhere, with whom I went on a trip several years ago to see how the equivalent of community colleges in Singapore are integrated with industry, and it was quite remarkable to see how intentional they were, how deliberate they were about the integration. And we don't necessarily do a particularly good job of thinking about integration and collaboration here the way they do maybe in Estonia or the way they did, I think we saw in Singapore. I wonder if is there a problem with the way that we think about this stuff, the system as it's constructed?
I think there's a problem at virtually every level in that process. I mean, you just start by the language. We don't use the same language to talk about the challenge. The way public schools are funded is toward a goal. It's a good goal, high school completion, but they're not looking beyond that going forward. And there's no incentives even to get students in college, or no incentives to make sure that they're prepared for the economy of the workforce. College is the same way. They tend to be structured and funded to look down and in, not up and out, so that we can really engage the community in a meaningful way. The ability to even connect is not there. I think as we look at, there are really ways to do some incentives, and some have happened in Texas through the Workforce Commission more than either the coordinating board or through the Texas Education Agency to encourage collaboration, but on a limited basis. I mean, the idea behind the Pathways to Technology, PTech legislation that Senator Taylor carried through the last session that we've used to implement was all about providing support for collaboration.
Yeah. Chris, I want to ask you the same question. From your perspective, is the system constructed in a way to unlock the potential of what we're talking about?
You know, I think, Evan, that, you know, I agree with the chancellor in the sense that where we fit in to this pipeline is, as you said, it's building the bridge between industry and the college.
Right.
You know, and so I've spent the last 20 years in higher ed, and to your point, we often see that we're not thinking about what's the next step. We're talking, are we training folks, is education an output or is it an outcome, right? So how are we looking at that? And what we are looking at is working with our corporate partners to identify those skills. And then, you know, we have as many staff focused in that space working to identify, is the program working? Are the students meeting the expectations of the workforce of what your needs are? And we're helping to work with the community college to tweak our curriculum to be able to solve for that.
So what's the biggest unleveraged opportunity right now? The thing that you think, if only this happened, if only this were in place, we would be able to do a better job of moving kids through the pipe, these opportunity youth through the pipe?
Well, I think a lot of it is what we're talking about is starting earlier. So we have to be raising and elevating the potential, elevating our gaze, thinking for young folks in, you know, our, growing, diversifying, but also increasingly in poverty, the young folks that are in our school systems, how do they start to see and have other options made available to them? Because I think a challenge is we speak about college for all, and college has to be with the recognition that maybe the 4-year pathway isn't the only way to a living wage job.
So you accept the premise that's increasingly, Chris, part of the conversation today, that maybe college is not for everybody, or maybe traditional 4-year college is not for everybody.
I think that's the key, because I think folks, when I have this conversation in the community, people see it as college or career. And in fact, I've been asked to speak on panels where it was, Chris, you're bringing in the career piece of this, as if a young person choosing to do a year-up program is an alternative. Whereas in fact, this last class, our 4th graduating class here in Dallas, 75% of them re-enrolled in college because now they understand how to navigate that system.
Chancellor, the fact is it's not college or career in your case. In the community college case, it's college and career.
Absolutely.
Right?
Well, absolutely. It's, you know, and you use the phrase, college is not for everyone. And what we mean, on some level, people think that means I don't need to go and get any additional education, that I should be able to get a job with a high school diploma, and that's wrong too. You know, and you talk about incentives, let's just talk at the federal level. So we serve a lot of economically disadvantaged students, meaning that they are eligible for federal financial aid through the Pell Grant in that particular program. And that's great if you're going for a 1-year certificate or associate's degree, but we have literally tens of thousands of jobs that we need people in where the training is much shorter than that. And guess what? You can't use a Pell Grant if it's less than a year. So we've got disincentives built in all the way through the system to actually get people into some of the education training that they need.
Theoretically, you and others have told the government that this is a problem, right?
I think at least several times a year.
Right. And what does government say?
Well, we've been able to get some listing. A bill just was filed again that would provide for short-term, we call it short-term Pell, that would do that. Congresswoman Virginia Fox, Dr. Fox from North Carolina, former community college president, and her, what she called the Prosper Act last session, had a 300-hour to reduce it from the what is 600-hour requirement now for length of programs. So we're seeing bipartisan support, but it's really taking a long time to get Congress to understand.
Just not there yet.
That this is an important issue.
Right. Judy, let me ask you what I asked Chris. What is the thing that's missing? What is the impediment or obstacle or thing that if you could change this piece of it, it would make the transition from school to work, from just regular old person to productive member of the workforce better?
So we actually see it as 3 things.
3 things.
3 things.
I love when you show up with a list. This is good. Please go on.
So I mean, Accenture has released some research, called "It's Learning, Just Not As You Know It." And one of the first things is what we've actually been talking about, which is the experiential learning, right? It's that hands-on learning. It's building those skills together and making sure that they're blended skills. It's not soft skills. It's not academia. It's both, right? It's that blended skill. The second thing is around not focusing on the institutions It's focusing on the individual. So, you know, traditionally our institutions were built around, like in the industrial area, you know, where we were building factory workers and, you know, business administrators, et cetera. Well, you know, our economy has evolved. We're no longer in that industrial era anymore, right? We're in the digital, if not post-digital era. And so focusing on the individual, instead of the number of graduates in a data science degree, as an example, it's more about the individual and the blended skills and that experiential learning. And then the third piece is enabling the what we would call the vulnerable or underserved learners, right? Because there's you've got and there's kind of two that's sort of it could be both, one or both, which is, you know, you've got the underserved being, you know, folks who typically don't have access to it, but there's also those that, you know, with the emerging technologies, there's going to be job augmentation, right? Mm-hmm. And there's also going to be job displacement in some places, and it's how do we reskill those people?
Right. And that's largely generational, is it not? The people who are being displaced often tend to be older, or is there also a case of some being younger too?
No, I think we see it across the board. I mean, even we've seen some of our military, you know, our veterans, where, you know, they go off and serve our country and
Come back and the job that they had is not available.
that's right. That's right. And we've got to, and you know, it doesn't mean that they're now this 40, 50-year-old person. They're still young.
The transition, Judy, that you mentioned from largely a manufacturing economy to one that's more, what was the phrase you used, post-digital or?
Post-digital era?
That's post-digital,
Post-digital
kind
era?
of frightening to think about that. I mean, one difference is that kids growing up wouldn't have necessarily had capacity to do what was required of them on the manufacturing side of the manufacturing economy, but kids today are technically sophisticated. And they show up in some ways a little bit more workforce ready as far as that set of skills goes, you would think, right?
That's true, but,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, we also think of these kids, you know, again, back to these soft skills. I mean, I think we can all, you know, if I asked everybody to raise their hands, how many times do you go even to a family gathering and everybody's got their nose in their phone as opposed to just having a normal conversation?
Right.
Right? These kids are, their social skills are not.
Right. Posting something on Snapchat effectively does not make you ready to work for Accenture.
That's right. That's right.
Although it's probably helps, though. Actually, right. Chancellor, you've mentioned poverty a couple times as a factor in all of this. Am I remembering from your bio that you were the first in your family to go to college?
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So we do have, I mean, you are understandably sympathetic probably to the predicament of a lot of kids who would be their own firsts. And there's a psychological aspect to getting somebody over that line, which ultimately puts them on the right track, along with all the other aspects of it. Can you talk about that?
Sure, and you know, every situation is different, but we have a lot of individuals in these families that are coming out of poverty. No one's gone to college. They don't understand it. It seems impossible to them, and I'll explain why.
The impediment is cultural almost.
It is, right? Yeah. And these students have heard all their lives, we can't afford to send you to college, and the parents believe that's true. The students believe that's true. And they don't understand that opportunity exists for everyone today to attend and that the resources are there with community colleges. I think part of what has kind of corrupted in some ways the understanding is the way that many of the universities have evolved to selling a brand and a lifestyle. And that's what folks, they're really selling, what they can do for you while you're in college, the lifestyle you're going to have there, what they can do for you when you're out of college and that lifestyle. When these individuals can't even relate to that. What they're looking at is, I need a better future, and I need to go from where I am here in Pleasant Grove into a home and where I can raise a family and meet the needs of that. And the disconnect between the public perception of brand and lifestyle higher education and the realities of getting people prepared for life and career are two very different things.
So it's absolutely fascinating. So on this question of poverty, but a little bit maybe broadening it out to change in population, what we're seeing in Texas, there are three significant drivers of the future of this state. They relate to education. They really relate to every issue area. One is that the population of our state is growing like crazy. We will double our population between now and 2050, or almost double it, from about 29 million to 54 million. There'll be 54 million people in the state of Texas in just over 30 years. The second thing is that we're rapidly becoming much more of an urban state. We now have 6 of the 20 largest cities in the country, more than any other state. That's a trend that's not going to reverse back. And the third thing is that demographic inevitability is upon us. The population of citizens of color of Texas right now is 57%. Again, that's not a trend that's going to reverse. How do any of those inputs affect this conversation as we not only think about now, but think about the future of moving kids through the education pipe to the world of work? Growth in population, change in demographics of the population, and the urbanization of the state. How do those factors affect
It's
this
imperative that we address it. We must. I mean, in Dallas County alone by 2050, 88% of our residents will be people of color. And we have this growing poverty where we've had 42% increase in poverty in the last 13 years. We have to do this. We must address this. And we have to be able to recognize that the very challenges that we're raising, the barriers that folks are facing in considering options for jobs that are there, for middle-skilled jobs that are there.
can be more prevalent in communities of color.
Absolutely, absolutely. How can we elevate that and remove those barriers and provide that kind of curated pathway? Because our economic prosperity as a state, as a region, depends on it.
Right. Judy, that's of course where we're headed. Right now, I believe the statistic I understand to be true is that the Anglo enrollment in the Dallas Independent School District today is below 5%. So we're not talking about a state where change is coming, we're talking about a state where change is already here. And so again, as you're going down into the middle school and the public, you know, and lower, in the public schools to start to help these kids think about the world, in many cases, the community of students you're addressing have embedded challenges coming out of the gate.
Yeah, and you know, and I would say, I mean, so I mean, you're not saying this directly, but I'll just go out and say, I mean, in terms of the inclusion and diversity of the types of people, right? I mean, one of our core values is best people, and in order to have best people, it's got to be everybody, right? Inclusion and diversity is a very key topic for Accenture, and I know many other folks in the industry are there as well. And so, it's about enabling these folks and partnering with different programs and making sure that we're looking at that untapped talent pool in all spaces.
Chancellor, I think about the growth in population, and particularly the growth in the urban population in Texas, and I think if you're getting 50% of everybody now through the community college door, when that population goes to 54 million, where are you going to put all these people? How are you going to accommodate as many students as are going to want to come to this institution and others? What are you going to do?
Well, we don't really have a choice, do we, as a state and as a community, because the jobs are going to be there. I mean, there's only two ways to grow the economy. Either we, and particularly GDP, we either increase the size of the workforce or we increase the productivity, and we're in the business of trying to do both
right.
at the same time. So, of course, we do, in addressing that now, we've realized that we've got to plan for the future. So we presented to the voters here in Dallas County an opportunity on Saturday to vote for or against a bond that would allow us to build and grow over the next 10 years to meet the needs of this community.
How big a bond?
Change. It's a $1.1 billion bond.
Right, and so that's something that would be done locally. You're not looking to the state with your hand out to solve the problem. You're trying to take ownership of the problem and of the solution here.
Well, we have to do that. I mean, the reality is the state is the least reliable portion of our revenue piece. Thanks to the local taxpayers, we have stability in order to meet those needs, and we've used that to keep tuitions second lowest in the state of Texas.
You're hoping that by the time they get out of Austin, they're not going to cap your ability to raise revenue through the community college property tax district
if
door,
you see
right?
me look down at my phone, it's because somebody just texted me.
Right, yeah. So you really can't look to the state. The state's not going to be possible to solve as a solution. So you got to take ownership of that actually here.
And all the things it takes to do with it is really a local issue. I mean, as we mentioned, we've seen the median family income in North Texas, Dallas particularly, decline by 15% since the year 2000. We've seen our students needier than ever. We've seen more having to go into college than we have in the past because the jobs require it. So we're having to reach further into the schools, and that means we're getting engaged in things like putting food pantries at every single college and partnering with that, of looking at how we administer emergency aid to students, how we now provide public transportation because we discovered that that was an issue keeping people from completing college. If you can't get here.
It's not like accepting them is the end of the relationship, it's only the beginning, right?
That's exactly
yeah.
right. So that it does no good if they come in our door, but you never get a product out the end that meets the employer's needs in this room or anywhere else, and we all suffer and pay a price. So we're having to look at it differently, and the state pays little or no attention to the fact that our students are hungry, that our students can't have transportation issues, that they are paying attention to some of the mental health challenges that we see as, again, we go deeper, but that's not at the scale that we're going to need to address some of these issues.
Let me ask each of you, since we focus so much on staying on the topic of government, we focus so much on how government can or cannot be an actor in trying to address some of these issues. Are there specific policies that would be helpful to you? I'll stay with the chancellor for a second. Sure. Even though you can't count on state government's funding as reliable, you've got to take ownership of this stuff yourself. What would help?
Sure. Well, and policies do matter as we look at it. Senator Royce West has a bill, Senate Bill 25, up this session to address the transfer issue. The failure of courses taken at not just two-year college, but four-year to four-year transfer that students are having to repeat costs the state millions of dollars every year.
So transferability is an issue, and it also costs families, often families
Absolutely.
that can least afford to pay the costs a lot, right?
Well, and they can use up financial aid eligibility repeating courses so that when maybe they get the bachelor's degree, but then they don't have eligibility to get the master's degree or to go on and continue. Right. So there's a limit to what can be, or they end up having to take on debt, which then interferes with their ability to purchase cars, buy homes, invest in the community and their families. Yeah.
Chris, what do you think from a policy standpoint could be done differently that would enable you to do the work that you all do?
I think a huge piece of it for us, a lot of the way that our work happens is because our corporate partners are investing in us and allow us to keep the cost of what we do down so that the Pell Grant can cover the cost of those challenges. But that starts to, as the Chancellor mentioned, the financial aid policies, the ways that we if you fail that class, what the impact is and how we manage that for a broad range of our community and folks who may not even qualify or may not be able to apply, whether they're being able to have those, and we haven't even addressed the issue of DACA here in our state and how that impacts also.
Talk about that.
Well, we are the #1 city in the country, that kills me, right, for apprehensions, ICE apprehensions. When we talk about the challenge we have with students even being interested or applying to attend our program, which is dependent on them being able to apply for financial aid, that has an impact. Right. It certainly has an impact on whether they're going to elevate enough to be able to apply for these opportunities.
So your belief is that in this environment politically, there's embedded risk in stepping out for fear that your status will be a liability.
That's not I believe. I know.
You know it to be the case. So Texas is a state just second only to California in the number of DACA recipients. The political climate, which we don't necessarily think of as a factor in this, is a factor in this.
Absolutely.
It is.
And I just want to speak to give you an example. One of the young men that came through our program just graduated. Actually, you heard him at our event not too long ago. Brian, he is a young dad, wanted to work. Came to this country, is a DACA student, came through our program, is now working as a project manager for JP Morgan Chase in their Legacy campus in the same building that he helped build in construction. He is now being able to provide for his family and has just asked for a referral, and we're working, and my colleague here, Luisa De Rosal, I'm gonna ask you to help me out. He's interested in attending the SMU Cox School of Business and has the grades because of the work that we've done with the community college district. You're gonna tell me that's not somebody we want in our workforce and contributing to our prosperity? And if those challenges, he was one of the few that had the courage to be able to apply.
Right. Judy, what does industry want? There's an assumption that industry always wants something. What does industry want that it's not getting? What would make it possible, more possible for you to do what you need to do on this topic?
It really comes back to, being able to empower our people, right? And by doing so, it's, we've got to re-envision the pathways. We've got to make learning not just a point in time, but it needs to be a lifelong learning, right? Because we can't even, the jobs that are changing today, we can't even think about what the new jobs are, right? I mean, technology and the workforce is changing so much that there are jobs that, like, none of us in this room even can imagine exist, but they're going to be there, right? And so we've got to be able to keep that learning a lifelong journey and being able to help people define those pathways, envision that for themselves, giving them access to that learning.
Good. So we're going to bring you into the conversation here for the balance of our time. We've got microphones on either side. Let me encourage you to step up, ask a question of our panelists. Let's talk about some things that we haven't talked about so far today. Anybody want in? Sir.
I'll go first.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of the Dallas County Community College. I bought a house 50 years ago at Valley View and Marsh Lane, not knowing that Brookhaven College would be there. And I've been pleased with it ever since I became aware, probably 48 years ago.
Great.
My question is, what is the single constraint that prevents DCCD from serving 10% more students? And
Right.
I'm curious if the role of the trade schools, which are Legion, is some part of that constraint.
Do you have the capacity if 10% more showed up on your doorstep today? Could you accommodate them?
We could, and as we look at that, we are planning for the future with our bond, but we've also seen a tremendous growth of online education during that same time. So that's allowed us to do things differently. We also have flexibility in terms of how we structure and put classes together going forward to meet those needs. The reality is that we will partner, we will find a way, we will lease space. We now lease space downtown. We're just actually hopefully we'll be signing a lease out near Brookhaven again to expand going forward. So don't think of the campus itself as a limitation. We now partner and work in this year about 42, 43 high schools throughout the area, as well as partner with other organizations. With our Work Ready U, which is our adult ed piece, we're involved with community organizations throughout Dallas County. So it's not just the campuses themselves. Think of that as a hub that allows us to extend into the community and serve that community in unique ways. Some of the things have to be there because of the uniqueness of the programs, but others, that's not the case.
Judy and then Chris, does the ability for people to do self-paced distance learning, online education as opposed to in the actual classroom, create an opportunity? Does it create unintended consequences? How does that help in terms of the workforce preparation?
Well, I mean, it does start with academia, right? So,
Right.
I mean, online education is just as good as a traditional classroom education,
Or
right?
just as bad as the case may be, right? I mean, there's probably good and bad classroom education and good and bad online, but the fact is online does not necessarily put you off as a way of preparing.
No, but I mean, going back to, how we need to evolve this, I mean, whether it's online or in the classroom, we still need to evolve it, right? Because we've got to get people, partnering with our programs and, doing more of the apprenticeships and the internships so they get that hands-on learning.
Chris, the lives of the people you described, they're probably working a couple jobs, they've got to raise a kid. It may actually be more convenient for some of these folks to do it on their own time at odd hours, and that may be made available by technology in a way that a generation ago that was not a possibility.
I think to what Judy's saying, from a content delivery perspective,
Yep.
absolutely.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about the skills that what we hear from our corporate partners they're looking for, and particularly with the folks that we serve, the normalization of just basic professional norms, the kind of social skill
Socialization,
interaction,
right? Yeah, right.
all of the cohort-based, really, we say it's our secret sauce for Year Up, but we really believe that what makes it possible is a community around you who has the same goals and the same vision, and they set up that sense of community, and that you're being coached constantly and consistently against a set of values that the workforce needs. So, like one of our core values at Year Up is strive to learn. Well, that's enacted in the interaction that you have with your colleagues, somebody giving you feedback, Evan, and saying, an area of strength I see in you is this, but an area of growth is this.
Right.
Learning and working on that has to be done, I think. It's all about relationship and person to person.
And online doesn't necessarily allow for that.
And I would just add, I mean, there's a lot of technology today that allows us to, to expand that. Virtual reality, augmented reality. These are ways that we can apply, new ways of learning. I mean, they're tools. It's not the end state, of course, but tools that allow us to apply that learning. We can help, simulate situations that sometimes you can't even, you cannot produce real time, right? Because either it's too dangerous or it's just not possible, but something that you can prepare them for, through some of these newer technologies.
Good. Ms. Young.
Hello there. I just have a question. You've talked a little bit about soft skills, call them power skills or workforce skills, workforce ready skills, and also lifelong learning. And I know when you look at certifications, they seem to be very point in time. They're Adobe certifications, they're welding certifications, they're sort of get this, move on to a job. Do you foresee us being able to have something that is robust and meaningful, but is an employability skills certification? I mean, something that employers could actually help school districts create or help the state of Texas create that could actually help enable that lifelong
An employability credential in and of itself. Interesting.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things that historically happened was that people used the degree itself as a proxy for the soft skills or the others that's out there, believing that experience added to it. We've seen that, frankly, decline, and you may have seen where Google and some others have dropped degree requirements from hiring. Other companies have as well. Even those that haven't, we're in discussions with them. They're talking about it because it really gets to the skill sets that students our employees are bringing in with them. And certainly it's not, the truth is, boy, I hate to say this, but it's true, to some degree, content is a commodity. And what really adds the value for are some of these other skills that individuals need that are somewhat harder to quantify, but absolutely can be taught.
Good.
Can I just add that?
I wish you would.
Can I just add that from an industry perspective, it goes beyond the resume, right? They're looking at the experience, and how they're applying that experience, right? Again, it's just because you're a data scientist doesn't mean that you know how to appropriately adapt the models to a situation that is unique.
And in fact, if I can add also that's why we call them opportunity youth. We feel that these young adults, 18 through 24, they have life. They're grads of life. They've had experiences that are teaching them those very skills.
They're much more mature probably today than that same age might have been a generation ago.
Well, and again, I'm going to cite, and Brandy, correct me if I'm wrong, my colleague over here who works with our corporate partners is, what we have found and have studied is four-year college grads that are going into some of our partners, they're sticking around for 18 months, right? Our students are sticking around for 40 months because they are getting really deep engaged with that partner and being able to add that value.
Is there something specifically about, say that again, so four-year college graduates are spending less time?
Less time, middle skilled entry level job. They're moving on. Oftentimes they have lots of debt, right?
Right.
Our students.
So I was going to say, what's the reason? Well, that's one of the reasons.
That's one of the reasons.
Right.
But I think the other piece is the stick-it-to-itness because they're really valuing that opportunity as well. The corporate partners really appreciate the level of engagement that those team members are having when they come into their jobs.
That's great.
Yeah.
Ma'am.
Dr. Matt, you mentioned that the partnerships are hard. Who's missing from that partnership bucket and that needs to come to the table, and what do you need from them?
Oh, that's great. Name names.
Categories of.
I love that.
Who's
You know,
still-
and I've said this before, we're lucky in Dallas. We got lucky with a superintendent came into Dallas that was willing to partner. It sounds common sense, but many superintendents said no. We won't partner with you. We won't work with you on early college high schools or P-Tech high schools. We got lucky in that we got a president of the university that was willing to sit down and actually work with us on, I think about, again, with some of the curriculum at Seagoville when we were looking on that, particularly the IT pathway. Folks looked at it and said, this is not what we need today. And so, but it's going to take us working jointly with the high school, with the university, and with the college to make that work. So you take any one of those, the employer out of play, you take looking both for us downstream and upstream out of play, we're going to be misaligned and not meet those needs. And I think perhaps I'm most excited about the business engagement in that, but neither one of us really know how to do that very well. And I was thinking about a conversation actually we had involving Accenture in the past of I think you're doing 12 internships, or is that the right number? Which we need, and we need a lot more, folks. This is so important that these students have that opportunity to get engaged with a corporate partner and really learn that going forward. But sometimes we don't do even a good job of matching those with either the needs of the individual or the needs of the partner, and we can't do that unless we figure out how to get closer together. So Lynette, we need more of it. I believe we have almost 80 companies now. We're going to be adding many more P-Tech high schools coming forward. We need 2 business partners for each one. And
Are there kinds of industries, Chancellor, that are not stepping up as much as others are? And
we see it. We see it broadly that we have engagement. It's pretty much a who's who of everyone. But again, it really some of it is a philosophical issue that they don't see coming out of high school as part of their talent pipeline. We think that's a misunderstanding, but certainly the more we can engage. Others feel like it's an imposition because of the size of the business, and but we do have both small and large enterprises engaged with us in this work. But 80 out of this population, we really need more than we have. The goal would be right now to get about 200 companies engaged in the work.
and you're at 80 now.
Yeah, we're at 80.
The internship piece, Judy, that the Chancellor is talking about is critical to both ends of this, right? It's critical for his students, but it's also critical for you to have access to that young talent in those positions.
Yes, we work together. It goes from, of course, working together on curriculum, but also sitting on some of the boards, but
Right.
getting involved in student activities, right? Bringing them in. We've got kind of more broadly, we have a Skills to Succeed learning exchange program, where we're helping to skill some of these students,
Right.
And young adults.
And Chris, same, internships are a big component of.
It's a huge part. And so, in fact, that's basically our model, right?
Right.
So it's a year, and the first year is the technical skills training and the soft skills training that continues into the second half of the program that is a full 6-month internship, full-time internship, where the student is gaining that experience, but at the same time, the corporate partner is essentially interviewing a young person for a
Right.
job. And here in Dallas, and I'll put out there, I will say, we have a national perspective on this question of collaboration, and I certainly don't want to minimize what my colleague here is saying, but the level of collaboration that we have seen in Dallas County around these issues, motivated by the focus of this pressing need that we have, has
Right.
been so impressive.
Right.
And so those internships become such an important part
Yeah.
for the corporate partner of identifying, look, this is somebody where I want to convert them to jobs. And so on every metric that Europe looks at, wage, conversion directly into a job, which has the longest term impact for the young person, as well as just general student outcomes. Are they re-enrolled in college? Are they re-enrolled? They're
Right.
the highest in the country based on the partnerships that we have.
In Dallas.
In
That's
Dallas.
That's pretty good. Sir,
Okay, so you're covering all the STEM. My biggest concern is how about the home building community? Because right now in Austin, we're talking about property taxes, we're talking about appraisal values. Well, one thing over and over, you can have as many doctors as you want, nurses as you want, engineers as you want, lawyers. How about that home building? So Dallas County Community College, how are you helping with the home building community today?
Sure.
And 5 years from now.
And let me, several ways, and we're going to continue to expand on that. We've had a long-term partnership with the Construction Education Foundation, where we worked collaboratively with them in North Lake College. We're now in the process of designing to build a new 90,000 square foot facility that would allow us to expand that effort and to grow it over time. We've been in a 60,000 square foot facility forever to meet the need. We also partner with Wilmore Hutchins High School with a P-Tech high school there, where we work with the Construction Education Foundation, Texo, other employers in the area. That one's construction management. We're just starting one that's going to be more on the construction skills with another. We haven't yet announced that, but with another Dallas high school. We're expanding right now. The big one we're growing in South Dallas at Cedar Valley College, expanding our commercial heating, ventilation, air conditioning program. We've had a residential. There's a real shortage of needs there, and we're got with the hopefully with the bond dollars that we have, that's really a targeted area to grow out the construction industry and expand that even more. So we see those all as critical. But I go back to what I mentioned earlier. Federal policy doesn't align with us providing support for that, because again, those are the one students that generally have to pay out of pocket or be sponsored by the employer, because the Pell Grant does not cover the majority of individuals going into specific technical skill programs that are the programs less than a year.
They're shorter in
terms, yeah.
length. Hi.
Hi, good afternoon. Excuse me, thank you. I'm Jada Batchelder with Education Opens Doors. A question that I have for the group is, as we think about 65% of all jobs requiring a post-secondary degree, and we think about all of the different partnerships and interventions that are happening in our city, I kind of have a twofold question, and it's not a plant. I know that some of you know what I do, but it's a wondering about what point should we have these interventions begin to take place, and what could that look like for our opportunity youth? And so really kind of wondering about like what systemically would make the most sense for the timing in which we would start talking to youth about these different opportunities and all of these different programs that we're putting in play. And my second question, as we talk about the fear of paying for it, how do we engage parents? And so how do we engage parents in this process? So as we are doing these interventions with youth, the parents are being informed in the same way and are coming alongside them, so that there's not a further barrier for exposure or taking that leap to pursue those pathways.
Excellent. Chris, and then Judy.
Yeah, I think a big piece of this is earlier, right? I mean, we're talking about this in terms of kind of seeding. We interact with many young folks who think they think we're a scam explicitly. They think it's a scam. It's not possible that this could be the only option other than going to work right now at a minimum wage job is to go into college and spend money that my parents say I can't.
They're very, very skeptical.
They're very, very skeptical.
Right.
In fact, one of my coachees from class 2 at graduation, I looked at her and I said, "When did you think this wasn't a scam?" She goes, "Tonight." And I couldn't believe it, but it's consistent across the country. So I think sooner having more conversations with the families, basically normalizing that it's college and career readiness, that it's okay to fill your belly before you fill your mind, that those are real things and real concerns that some of these parents face. And also just normalizing the idea that, these are great jobs. I think that's the piece that's missing
Right.
when we talk about these middle skill jobs. Our students are making 3 times minimum wage, $20 plus an hour, coming into the job. I have a coachee for my second class, Katie, who is a mom. She just finished her accounting degree at Dallas Baptist. She is working. She just got promoted again at one of our major employers and just bought a house. She's 21 years old. I paid off my student loans 4 years ago. Right. I mean, we're talking about the position, the opportunity for these folks. Elevating that, honestly, I think is a huge piece of what we need to be doing. And the earlier, the better, and making these options a norm for the young people.
Judy,
in the
same.
community.
Earlier the better.
I love that she's saying normalizing, because really it is the earlier the better. Of course, in more practical terms, it's in the college levels. I mean, we're really going to reinforce that, but all the way down to the youngest education levels. You know, the more they hear it, to me, it's like swimming, you know? I mean, the sooner you get in the pool, the more,
Right.
the more comfortable you're gonna be. Same thing
Yeah.
with education, right? And learning that these are not untouchable, this is not an untouchable goal, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I love you fill your belly before you fill your head. I love that. You know, it really is about the exposure early on.
And it was a plant, because I know the great work that Education Open Doors is doing, and it's so fantastic that you're doing that at the age that you're doing it at.
Chancellor, as we wrap here, it's interesting that it took us all this time to mention parents, because the fact is parents are a huge part of this conversation in terms of getting a comfort level in the household that results in kids being willing often to make that leap, right?
You know, they really are, and that's why really engaging, and again, I will also say, Jada, what you do with Education Open Doors is great, because it's a nonprofit that works with the teachers and the parents of 8th grade students during those middle school years to help them understand the expectations that, in fact, they can go to college. And I'm surprised. I still this student, have him in my head, Jose Alvarez was a senior class president at Grand Prairie High, top of the class, but has been told all of his life, we can't afford to send you to college. And he believed it. And then when we went in and showed him with the Dallas County Promise and others that was possible, he didn't believe us. He again, thought this had to be a scam. It had to be wrong. And because it's so ingrained in the thinking of families and young people today, and it's not that these aren't gifted, talented, able individuals, it's that they believe that door is shut, and that somehow all doesn't mean all. It means it's selective.
So
and
what
that's
happened to
really
him?
the message.
What happened to him?
He's now at El Centro College.
Yeah.
He takes advantage of the DART pass that we provide to get there. It's not easy for him, because it takes him over an hour to come and go during the day, but he's doing well. He's going to be successful. He's making plans to transfer, and we're going to support him throughout that effort.
That's great. Good place to, and upbeat note to end on, right? That's good news. Please thank our panelists, Judy Kuntz, Chancellor Joe May, and Chris Munoz-Feder. Thank you to Dallas County Community College for having us, and we appreciate it. We'll see you again. Thanks so much.